Right, spready votes. All right, thank you. So the reading for this morning is from the soliloquy that I presented a few weeks ago on the story from the Christian Gospel of Matthew about the miracle of the loaves and fishes. I asked a friend of mine who's a Methodist minister, is it okay to quote myself? She said, sure. Now, I don't know what's the miracle. The fact that the whole crowd of people, this community of strangers stranded in a lonely and unfamiliar place, gave what little they had to each other, or was it the fact that God multiplied it till we were all full? It seems to me that this loving and caring God Yeshua speaks about, that God meets us in lonely places through our own willingness and our trust, and through this teacher, the rabbi, who took what little we had to give and turned it into more than enough. As a chaplain at Baptist Hospital several years ago, it wasn't unusual for me to experience what might be called miracles, especially in the wee hours of the morning when I covered call for the entire hospital. Early one morning at 3 a.m., I was called to meet a middle-aged couple in the emergency room. A woman had brought her husband there, and they were in a private room down a quiet hallway, almost like a supply room, away from the usual hubbub that was the ER. The nurse had put them there on purpose because the man was actively dying from metastatic cancer. Although the couple had known that his death was imminent, the wife had panicked all alone at home and had brought her husband to the ER. And I was called to accompany them as they were saying their final goodbyes. Still gives me chills. Standing with the woman by the hospital bed where her husband lay, he was so slight at that point that I was able to hold them both tightly in my arms, and our faces were almost touching. I'm sure if an artist sketched the scene, it would be a complete circle, the way our arms and heads were so close together. Well, as his breathing became labored, we were huddled there. A hot wind blew suddenly and with such significant force through the room that I kind of peeked my head up to see who had come in the room, and no one was there. So as I returned my gaze to the family, the man took his last breath. Now, anyone who hasn't wandered the halls of the hospital in the middle of the night, accompanying God on call coverage, might explain the wave of heat I felt as the ancient heating system cranking on. But it wasn't winter, and the heat wasn't on. In fact, the ER staff kept the air conditioning more like a refrigerator because they were so busy all the time. And there was no movement outside the room, and there was no one in that room to interrupt the holy experience that I had the privilege to be part of. Was it a miracle? Maybe so. Or perhaps it was just one example out of many I've experienced of Spirit working the way Spirit works in wonderful and mysterious ways that are actually quite ordinary, even if they defy what we believe is humanly possible. I bring this up today because I want to revisit the idea of miracles that I raised the last time I was here. I kind of felt uncomfortable with kind of this magic wand kind of ending that I just read. The topic of miracles, especially the more than 80% that's estimated to have to do with some type of religious experience, it's a rather controversial topic. First off, how do you even go about defining something that appears to defy natural laws, or at least our understanding of those natural laws? How do you define it? And then once you've defined it, who gets to decide what qualifies as a miracle? What fits into that definition, and who gets to say so? Are miracles even possible? Or is there always a logical or scientific explanation of what really happened? Are they reserved for those rare individuals who have in some way seemed to transcend human limitation? Or are they mostly just carried out by a sleight of hand by magicians and charlatans? Snake oil kind of thing. Maybe you believe that miracles really did happen a long, long time ago, and now they are not to be had. The possibility of miracles has put science and religion at odds for centuries. It's as if these two facets of life are mutually exclusive. You can't have one and the other. It's either or. A few years ago, this was reflected in what I called the war of signs in our neighborhood. That was when the yellow "Thank You, Jesus" signs started popping up, which were also invented by Quaker, a little boy, 14, at Cedar Square Friends. So those started popping up, but it wasn't long after that the "Thank You, Science" signs started popping up as well. So there was this clearly an unspoken but inevitable debate as to which one, science or religion, had the upper hand. And people took a stance on whichever side they thought they believed in strongest. But to me, science and religion both have limitations. It's not unusual to hear that you just need to please God in some unknown way so that you can get your miracle. If you don't pray enough, though, if you don't do enough good, if you don't say the right things or think the right positive thoughts, if you aren't good enough, you're not going to get your miracle. That God, and I spell that God with a lowercase g, the capricious one, is not going to intercede, which leaves humans wondering, what did we do to get on that God's naughty list? And I hope you'll make my jump there. On another call in the hospital, I once witnessed the family of a 92-year-old matriarch being shamed by her minister, who told them that their lack of faith had kept God from saving her life. He then ordered them out of the room so that he could pray and bring her back from death. When the miracle he was praying for didn't occur, despite his rather loud and demonstrative prayers, he left that family in his wake, going down the hall, blaming them for not praying hard enough as they stood weeping in the hallway. Religion definitely has its limitations. But the same can be said for science. Over the centuries, we humans have learned the science behind a lot of seeming miracles like fire, electricity, the invisible waves that bring us radio and television and cell phones and Dick Tracy telephone conversations on our watches. Always feel like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. Yet scientists still cannot fully explain how birds and butterflies leave one particular place on a continent, fly to another particular place on a continent, and then return to the exact same spot year after year, generation after generation. We don't have all the answers. So much of the inner workings of the human body, the depths of the world's oceans, still remain a mystery. Science has yet to answer difficult questions like, is there really a God? And which came first, the chicken or the egg? They haven't answered that either. So when it comes to science and miracles, I really like the point of view of Cornell University physics professor David Merman. Merman says that science is a tapestry made up of many threads, scientific experiments and findings, interpretations and explanations that are layered with judgments and observations. Those scientific insights are also woven with the threads of each scientist's personal biases like cultural, historical, social, philosophical, and religious beliefs. Even one of the most brilliant scientists in human history, Sir Isaac Newton, explained in 1660 that some discrepancies in the solar system just required an occasional adjustment by God. Even as brilliant as he was, for him there was no other explanation except a religious one. But I think we can take several steps back from Merman's science tapestry to get an even broader perspective on miracles. If we embrace both science and spirituality, then the tapestry of science becomes, and all those fibers, that just becomes threads in the total spectrum of human existence. As the first Oxford University professor of theoretical chemistry, Charles Colson, writes, God is in the gap of scientific knowledge. So mind the gap, huh? Just as we Quakers find the inner teacher in silence, perhaps it is that what we don't know about how the mystery of life operates that actually constitutes a miracle. That's what we call it, because we don't know. Maybe there are laws beyond space and time and beyond our limited human understanding that make miracles a common occurrence. It's just that we have to have the eyes willing to see them, and the ears willing to hear them, and the hearts willing to believe them. So apparently, Quakers are quite gifted at the both and of science and miracles, science and spirituality. The Religious Society of Friends is one of the most highly represented denominations in all scientific fields, from astrophysics and atomic theory to zoology. In fact, there are so many Quaker scientists that there's a Wikipedia page dedicated to Quaker scientists. And that list, I'm looking on, it's like, oh, he's not there. So it's not an exhaustive list. But here's a couple of surprising examples. The first female American astronomer, I lost my place here. And the only woman admitted to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences for nearly 100 years was a Nantucket Quaker. Her name was Maria Mitchell, and she was born in 1818. So for almost to the turn, after the turn of the 20th century, she was the only woman in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Another world-renowned astronomer, Marjorie Williams, actually graduated from Guilford College in the early 1900s. I'd never heard of her. And she volunteered with the American Friends Service Committee during World War II. So some of you also may recognize the names of contemporary Quaker scientists like George Ellis, the astrophysicist that I have quoted here, and Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who is an Irish Quaker, and she spoke at New Garden Friends meeting some years ago. I had the personal privilege of serving on the steering committee of Friends for LGBTQ Concerns with Asheville Quaker Gary Briggs. Gary was a national oceanic and atmospheric meteorologist who was best known for the highly respected Briggs equations that measured gas dispersions like those that occur when a train derails. It's like, wow, I didn't know that. In recent years, I think the field of quantum physics has in some way strengthened the connection between science and miracles. And much has been said in that light about religion and science. One particular joke is that in the 1950s, if you asked the scientists if they were religious, they would say, "Of course not, I'm a scientist." But now, after what quantum physics has brought us so far, if you ask that same question of a scientist, they would say, "Of course, I'm a scientist." To paraphrase Cambridge University scientist and Professor Colin Humphreys, scientists nowadays, who can also believe in miracles, will first reduce the miraculous to the ordinary as much as possible. But those who believe in miracles, who may also be scientists, will discover miracles in the familiar. All of us, scientists or not, have an opportunity and the challenge to stay open to the real possibility of miracles. We might observe small miracles quite unscientifically, quite honestly, maybe a little sarcastically, like, "It's a miracle I didn't burn supper." Actually had a magnet that said, "Supper's not ready till the smoke detector goes off." Or, "It's a miracle our grant proposal got approved." Or it's a miracle the bus ran on time today. I'm sure you can all name several small miracles that have happened in your day already, if you think about it. We can also appreciate bigger miracles like human connectedness, which always amazes me. Or a big miracle like the mathematical miracle of the spiral shape called the Fibonacci sequence. Anybody heard of it? Mm-hmm. Mathematically appears in nature so often that it is called God's fingerprint. That's a miracle. Big miracles like the vastness of outer space and now countless galaxies that are out beyond our vision. The incredible dance between Earth and our own moon to me is miraculous. Where would we be without something that moves the tides in and out? As the old song goes, 100 million miracles are happening every day. Perhaps they seem to happen more often when we're alert to their possibility, or when we trust that miracles can really happen, that they aren't a perverted manipulation of natural law or carried out by deceptive people, or that miracles are passé, they've come and gone. Maybe, just maybe, Miracles are the way grace enters our lives. When Spirit is working the way Spirit works, in wonderful and mysterious ways that are actually quite ordinary. And so it is.